What is Downtown Crossing, and does anyone live there? Here's a quick video about Downtown Crossing and some of the other areas in downtown Boston. Talking about new neighborhoods in Boston usually means things that were built before the 20th century. But here in Boston, we do have a couple that have, while they have had residential in the past, a few condos here and there, they've really kind of exploded as new residential areas in the city. That's mainly in Downtown Crossing and in the Seaport. For Downtown Crossing, there's always been a kind of a smattering of condos located throughout Downtown Crossing, usually an old commercial building that had been converted. Along Washington Street, Winter Street, and some other places, there was always a few condo buildings sprinkled throughout, or buildings that had a little bit of commercial, a little bit of residential, and kind of an interesting mix. However, in the last 5 to 10 years, you've seen a real explosion of new development, starting with the old Filene's Basement location right in the middle of Downtown Crossing, 45 Province, which was actually a little bit earlier than that development, and a few other ones as well. It ends up being a lot of high-end condos. So you have 45 Province, you have Millennium Tower, you have the Ritz, you have a few other ones that have kind of sprung up as pure residential, sometimes with retail on the bottom, but as new developments. And then you've also seen a few conversions from older office space to residential, where sometimes this is a one-off condo, but other times it's the whole building that changes over. If you haven't visited Boston in 10 years, there are some areas you wouldn't recognize. If you went to Seaport and you had been there previously, you probably would have just called it Southie or the harbor. But now Seaport is its own monster, and it is kind of an interesting place. I will actually have a whole separate video about Seaport because it is a lot to cover. But let's basically just give you the lay of the land, is that there were a lot of old, big flat lots, as they called them, that were developed into large condo buildings, mixed use development, so a lot of retail. It's kind of a cool and vibrant area of the city that has really just come about in the last 10 years. So if you're kind of really looking for that, New York City feel, that really downtown feel, Seaport is one of the areas that you should look at. And for the rest of Boston, if you're, as people who are living here already, it's a fun place to go visit. And the Seaport community has a very active activity schedule, so they'll do different things. I've seen curling, there's in the winter, in the summer they do a lot of markets, there's a winter market, there's other things. So there's always something going on, so it brings a lot of people. There's some great new retail shops, so you've seen them trying to compete with some of the back bays and Newbury Streets with their own version of a big retail center. And there's some great restaurants over there as well. So it's definitely a place to check out if you haven't already. And if you, like I said, if you haven't been to Boston in 5 to 10 years, you really won't recognize it because it's completely different. But getting back to Downtown Crossing and the financial district, sometimes it's a little bit of both. It's right kind of on the edge. Location-wise, it is right on the edge of the park. So on one side you have Beacon Hill, the other side you have Back Bay, Bay Village, and then you kind of have Chinatown and Downtown Crossing. It's also a financial district sometimes, and the divisions can be a little murky between Downtown Crossing, the financial district, North End, Chinatown, Leather District. There's a few different names for a few different parts. Sometimes they all get lumped into one thing, which makes sense. If you have someone to help you navigate this, it can make a little more sense. And really it depends kind of building to building what the area feels like, because one place, even just a block away, can feel a lot different than another place. And it's kind of interesting to see stuff along Tremont Street is going to have a different feel to it than stuff that's even a block in on Avery Street or Washington Street, things like that. So it's definitely good to kind of visit some of these places to get a sense for it. And, it's a great place to live. But I've also seen, there's so many new buildings that if you've looked before, you might want to look again, just because there's different options there now. One of the great things about Downtown Crossing is that, similar to Beacon Hill and Back Bay, you really are kind of in the center of Boston, and it's easy to get to transportation, it's easy to get to retail shops and other things. Parking can be a pain, so if your building that you're looking at does not have parking, I would definitely consider that as something that you'll need to figure out if you have a car. You may not need a car, depending on how much you would use it going outside the city and things like that. And a lot of these condo buildings do have parking. Some of them even have valet parking, things like that. So it's a great thing to keep in mind when you are looking, though. The other thing to keep in mind when looking at Downtown Crossing is that some of the areas can get pretty quiet at night. So when it's surrounded by all offices and retail, when those places kind of close for the night, so to speak, it can be a little bit of a ghost town in some areas. Other areas have been built up a little bit more. And with the new additions in the last couple of years, activity definitely has ramped up, but there are still definitely parts where it's more office and retail than residential. So, you know, on a Sunday night, you're probably just not going to see a lot of people, which to each its own. It might be a good thing, it might be a bad thing, depends on kind of your situation. I would also say that people who are looking, if they have, you know, kids, whether they're four-legged or two-legged, some of the parts are a lot more accessible to parks and playgrounds and dog parks, whereas other buildings are maybe a little bit farther of a walk to those things. So that's also something that I kind of keep in mind is, you know, if you're going somewhere every day or a lot during the week, you know, you might want to make sure that you're close enough to enjoy those things. One of the other great things about Downtown Crossing is that you kind of can draft off some of the other neighborhoods. So you've seen some of the new developments like the Sudbury and some of the ones along the waterfront are very close to North End or Beacon Hill. So even though it might not technically be in Beacon Hill or the North End, you would probably kind of consider yourself part of that neighborhood. And certainly if it's a block away, it's not like you can't walk there and enjoy those same amenities that you would if you were in, you know, the technical North End or technically in Beacon Hill. So it's kind of, if someone's looking for more of a high-rise condo, but they want to be in Beacon Hill, there are a few options where you'd be very close to Beacon Hill, but you get that same high-rise condo feel where you kind of get the amenities building, things like that, valet parking, you know, things that you're not really going to find very often in Beacon Hill. Although there are some of those buildings in Beacon Hill, you know, as you know, if you've looked in Beacon Hill before, those are very rare to find a building like that. Whereas most of them are row houses or small condo buildings, things like that, or single family homes. Overall, it's a great place to look, it's a great place to live, and it's somewhere definitely to check out if you're visiting Boston. There's a lot of great shopping, there's a lot of great places to see, and there's even some great roof decks and places where you can get up really high and kind of see the whole city, which is very cool. Something that it's easier to do maybe if you're in Back Bay, but now with Seaport, there are some rooftop bars and restaurants and things like that. And same thing with Downtown Crossing. There's a few great areas where you could go and check things out. If you have any more questions, please let me know in the comments. I'd love if you subscribe. Please hit the like button. That really helps to spread the word. And again, I love that everyone reaches out to me for questions about Boston. I try to put out a new video every week about Boston, about living in Boston and the Boston area. So if you're looking for something like that, please feel to check out my videos. I'll even cover Cambridge sometimes, but you know, thanks again for watching. Have a great day.